Here's what happened in Melbourne at the weekend, otherwise known as an episode of Law and Disorder. Two teenagers spent Saturday night prowling the suburb of Ringwood, attempting to steal cars and threatening to beat up a member of the public who challenged them. Then they attempted a carjacking, telling a motorist, and I quote, "We're taking your car, this is effing our car now, get out." When the terrified victim drove off, the teens struck the car, leaving a mark on the door. Police caught the would-be carjackers who appeared in court yesterday and were given bail. The magistrate told them, and I quote, "Come back here and I won't be happy." Well, nothing strikes fear into the hearts of violent offenders like a mildly disappointed magistrate. To the weekend's carjacking, we can add a shooting. People in Caulfield woke to the sound of gunfire early this morning as a suburban house was sprayed with bullets. A terrified neighbour told journalists, "I don't feel safe anymore. My kids also, they don't feel safe here. It's not the Australia that I know." Now, to the attempted carjacking and the shooting, we can add, of course, a machete attack.
Two teenage boys have been attacked by a machete-wielding group outside Melbourne's Luna Park in St Kilda. Police say the teens suffered minor slash wounds after being ambushed around 6:30 last night. The offenders fled in a grey Land Rover, crashing into another car before taking off. Right now, they are still on the run.
Victorian Premier Jacinta Allen had this to say when asked about yesterday's machete attack.
Look, this is shocking behaviour. It won't be tolerated.
Strong words from a government that's been tolerating shocking behaviour for years.
And I think it is important to express my thoughts with those victims of this brazen and unacceptable crime.
If only thoughts could stop violent crime. In fairness to Jacinta Allen, she doesn't just have thoughts, she has thought bubbles.
We have the machete disposal bins in location.
Hey, I'm not sure those slashed with machetes at the weekend feel less slashed because there was an unused machete disposal bin on location. So let's recap. A carjacking, a shooting, a machete attack. Feels like we're missing something. Oh yes, of course, a weekend in Melbourne would not be complete without a violent protest. This was the Melbourne CBD yesterday. Now, Jacinta Allen knew what journalists were going to ask her today. Does she still believe Melbourne is safe?
It should not be repeated, but I will repeat that yes, Melbourne's CBD is safe.
Oh, she is so right it should not be repeated, because it's a lie. How is Melbourne safe when police patrolling the CBD are being hospitalised? But it's a lie Jacinta Allen is now committed to, no matter how many carjackings, shootings, stabbings or violent protests she has to ignore. My question is, how does she expect to maintain such a blatant lie? Well, just as protesters came yesterday prepared with projectiles to throw at police, Jacinta Allen came today prepared with talking points to throw at the public. First off, she talked about the swift response from Victorian police. She used the term swift so many times today it was clearly calculated.
They were dealt with swiftly, dealt with it swiftly, with it swiftly, with swift.
Let me ask you a question. If you go into the CBD and get hit with a rock, do you insist the CBD is safe because, well, police responded swiftly? If you're stabbed with a machete, do you feel less stabbed because police responded swiftly to your stabbing? If you see riot police charging down Bourke Streets, clashing with violent mobs, do you feel safe? No? Well, what if the riot police charged down Bourke Street swiftly? Tell you what, police may be swift, but Jacinta Allen, she's a slug. She announced laws banning face coverings last December. She just hasn't got around to introducing them to Parliament yet. She defended the delay today, claiming the legislation needed to be handled with great care and consideration, kind of like how she handles criminals. What if I told you Jacinta Allen was leaving office swiftly? Would that make you feel safer? I think we all know the answer to that. Her next ploy was to insist that Melbourne was safe because, well, the violence and mayhem was being committed by a small number of people.
We see a small number of people, a very small number of people, a small number. There were a small number of people. Again, I want to emphasise it is a smaller number of people.
Yeah, now this of course begs the question, how many people throwing rocks and bottles does it take before you start to feel unsafe? Jacinta Allen expects us to believe that because the rioters were dozens rather than hundreds, the CBD is safe. I suppose if it were hundreds, that would be safer than thousands, and thousands of rioters would still be safer than tens of thousands. What a ridiculous rhetorical game she plays. But it got worse. Next, Jacinta Allen claimed that yesterday's violent protest was an anomaly, something entirely foreign to Melbourne.
What we saw yesterday was a very different pattern of behaviour, a very, very different set of violent behaviour, different pattern of behaviour. It was different behaviour.
Different? How was this different? Was yesterday's protest different because it was anti-racism protesters rather than anti-war protesters who tore up the city last year?
Fires, fights, flash grenades on city streets. Protests in the middle of Melbourne against an international weapons expo turned violent.
Get back!
Was yesterday's protest different because it was anti-racism protesters rather than trans rights protesters causing mayhem earlier this year?
A trans rights activist knocked to the ground, which quickly escalates. Violence erupting outside the State Library after members of the public began clashing with protesters. It followed confrontations between protesters and police across the city.
Yes, spot the difference is kind of hard with those. How was yesterday different to what we've seen in Melbourne over the past number of years? And why do we continually see this violence in Melbourne anyway?
Does that seem to happen in Melbourne and not other big cities?
Well, well, I don't think that's correct.
Come on. Everyone knows Melbourne is the violent protest capital of Australia. Jacinta Allen was asked again why we see violence in Melbourne when we don't see it in other cities, and I could not believe this response.
It doesn't matter which city it is in, that sort of violence under the cloak of protest was not just unacceptable, it violated that principle of the right and the obligation for people to protest.
It doesn't matter which city it's in? Try telling that to the people living in the city where the violence keeps happening, the city that she's the premier of. Melbourne used to be the world's most livable city. Now it's the world's most leavable. To stay safe in the Melbourne CBD, you have to walk around with your head on a swivel, constantly scanning for danger. The only consolation is that at least having your head on a swivel isn't as dizzying as listening to Jacinta Allen.